All right, everyone, welcome to our conversation today with a lovely lady named Chikk. She is in Houston right now, and let's see, I guess we knew you from LA, or John and Elizabeth knew you from LA, Chikk. But so Chikk is a multi-platinum songwriter and full-time recording artist. She's East Coast born, but West Coast raised, multi-talent, and as some of the countries, actually, I'd say one of the biggest countries' most celebrated K-pop songwriter, Chikk has penned crossover records for Korean pop icons and worked alongside music legends such as Rodney Jerkins, who did, let's see, Michael Jackson, Destiny's Child, HER, and Brandy, and became, let's see, what is it, Harvey Mason Jr.'s, which is did Whitney Houston, Beyonce, and Justin Bieber's protege of 5 years. That's pretty amazing. And so Chikk is on the rise to become one of this generation's top pioneers of spirit-led performers, songwriters, and speakers. So Chikk, I want to just let you add to that. So tell me a little bit more about what you do and who you are.
Oh my goodness, that was such a great intro. Thank you so much for having me today. I am an artist. I call myself a spiritual artist and a spiritual songwriter. Everything that I've achieved, everything that I do, it is from a faith-based life. And so it is quite unconventional in a secular marketplace as the music industry, but it has been proven to be the thing that has literally created a legacy for me. And
Yes.
I sing, I songwrite, I perform, I worship lead, I speak, and I do coaching for songwriters at my K-pop Academy, just upcoming artists that don't really know how to get started, but they love Jesus and they don't want to compromise. I'm like,
Nice.
you found the right place.
That's
So
awesome.
that's what I do.
Okay. So tell us, what is K-pop for someone who's maybe not familiar with that genre, or maybe they are, but they don't even know they've heard it.
K-pop is actually Korean pop music. So
Okay.
all the Korean girl groups and boy bands that we're seeing infiltrate our American music system.
hmm
I've been writing K-pop for 10 years. So I
Wow.
traveled to South Korea back in 2013, and I've been 14 times since.
Okay.
So yes.
How do you even land like that, like niche of music? Like, how did that happen?
It's absolutely God ordained, and I'm not even kidding. I have literally been writing since the age of 11 years old.
Nice.
But I was writing because they were teaching me like a lot of Whitney Houston, Aretha Franklin as a young
hmm
singer, as a young
Okay.
Black singer. And I love that. But I go into vocal lessons one day earlier and I hear a country song. And I was like, what's that? My mom wasn't playing country at home.
hmm
I'm like, I was hearing gospel and R&B. I was
Yep.
like, what is that? And so I started writing because I wanted to sing country. And so I wasn't really trying to write for other people, but a few years later, people would hear it in the industry and like, who's this little girl writing? And I'm like, oh, I'm just
hmm
writing because I want to sing country. But I end up being a songwriter.
Okay.
And by the age of 23, a publisher approached me and was like, we would love to take you to Korea to do this Korean pop music because the
Mm.
influence is pop and R&B. So I was like, okay. They said there'd be food and they'd feed me. So I said, yes, I'll go. I went and I left with two number ones that very first trip. Didn't
Wow.
know what I was doing, didn't know anything about K-pop. I left with
Mm.
two number ones that crossed over into America, which was some of their first Korean songs to come over into the Billboard charts, America. And then
Wow.
since then, I've had a handful of number ones. So
Wow.
it was just crazy.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, okay, so where are you from originally? East Coast? Where East Coast?
Wilmington, Delaware,
Okay. All right. That's awesome. And then when did you
literally.
move out to LA?
I was 8 years old with my mom and my
Okay.
sister, single mama, two girls. And she was
Wow.
like, I'm going to go be an actress. And we
Yeah.
went, and she was not an actress, but she did end up being an international hairstylist for all the celebrities. And that's how me and my sister
Wow.
were even able to network at such a young age.
Okay.
So, and then LA since.
Yeah. I think it would be a very interesting life to be raised in LA. Like, not to be like a transient person that goes there like after call. You know what I'm saying? Like, actually, like,
Right.
I remember seeing these kids that were raised in New York City on the tram, and it's like a 10-year-old kid just riding the subway alone, and you could tell like very street hardened in terms of like but
Yes,
that must
it
have
was
been really
interesting.
interesting.
It was because my mother's from the East Coast. You know, that
hmm
morale system is a little different. So I was in
Yeah.
the West Coast, but my mother at home was still East Coast.
Yeah.
So it was a lot going on. But I am grateful because I feel like my foundation and what she taught me was keep God first. And I feel like
hmm
that theology, you can thrive anywhere. So
Totally. Well, that was gonna be my next question. So how did you come to know the Lord, and like what was your upbringing like?
Oh my gosh, church, 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 and church.
Yeah.
And what's so funny about this, Chris, my father, he is not, he is now an incredible man. But back when I was young, he was a drug dealer. And he'll tell you he was a drug
Okay.
dealer.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
mother was not a drug dealer, but she obviously loved them. But she was working in the streets doing hair. She was just a
Mm,
hard working woman. So
mhm.
Monday through Saturday, that's what me and my sister seen. But on Sunday morning, I don't care how many drugs was sold, and I don't care how many hairstyles she had to hustle. Sunday morning, we was in the house of the Lord. And that was my foundation. When we moved to
Uh-huh.
LA, then me and my sister started serving. And my mom didn't have my dad at that time. He had been arrested. So he was in jail
Mm,
for a long period of my teens. So it was just my mama. And at that point, Jesus was her everything. So it went to church on Wednesday nights and then Sundays, and we were rebuilding our lives. And I got to know
mm,
Jesus in just such a beautiful light, not coming from a Christian family,
yeah.
but my mother always keeping him first. And so I'm in love with him now, and there's just nothing you can do about
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. I love that story. It's so interesting how even if like sometimes the things in life are not aligned or there's aspects of it that are just kind of hard to work through, like when someone
it.
really loves the Lord and they just kind of fight for that, it's like even if I'm like
Right.
even if there's these other parts of my life that are chaotic, I'm
Yep.
like not letting go of the Lord.
I refuse
you're gonna have to
to.
scrape me off the boat.
My mother was out there fighting in the street. My mom was a fighter, okay, Chris?
Yeah.
She was out there beating girls up, getting beat up half the time. But Sunday morning, black eye and all, we are going to it was the funniest story. And she's still like that, but she's like that for
Mm,
Jesus now.
yeah, yeah, that's awesome.
Yep.
I love that. So, okay, so tell me like who are Chick's favorite musicians? Like if you could give me like a top like five.
One of my favorite singers is actually Gary Laveau from Rascal
Okay.
Flatts.
Okay.
It's all I
Love his
listen to.
voice.
Like his voice is insane.
Yeah.
Um, Musically, Quincy Jones, what he
Okay.
did with Michael Jackson and
Yeah.
just our partnership, but musically, he's just out of this world.
Mm-hmm.
The minors, the dissonance, the cool moments, like
Mm-hmm.
that's like all I do, and I love
Mm-hmm.
it. Performance wise, Tina Turner is a big
Okay.
influence. She was just so free on stage.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think like there's this bridge that I'm finding between like this rock and roll country girl that's inside of me, like Tina, and then this
Mm-hmm.
worship leader who wants to like lead masses into a moment of encountering God's love. And so like it's like all these influences, but then like how can I get it out in my
Mm-hmm.
chick way?
Totally. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. That's really cool. Okay, what's been your favorite venue to play at then? Like what out of
Ooh.
all the places you've played?
I loved House of Blues. I did House of Blues years ago in
Okay.
LA. That
In
was so
LA,
fun.
that's an
Yeah.
amazing venue. It's so
But
cool.
it's so cool. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, it's so cool. And then I would have to say, actually, the Tasha Cobbs performance was
Okay.
actually one of my favorites. Just how it went about, but the performance was actually, I was
Yeah.
preaching the whole time, but it was
Yeah.
actually one of my favorite stage
Totally.
performances.
That makes sense. That makes sense. That's really cool. So, what's it like to just be a believer and work in this industry? Like, what has that experience been like for you? And what would you tell someone who's like, oh man, I would love to be a musician or work in entertainment somehow? Like, just kind of give us some color for what that experience has been like for you.
Absolutely. It's definitely been up and down.
Hmm.
Like some seasons are easier than others. I would say now I might have a pretty good grip, but just growing up in it, very confusing on identity. I was
Hmm.
like really in and out of who I was as a Black woman or as a young
Hmm.
Black woman. And sometimes having brown skin, especially back in the day, you go into a room like all the girls are either white or
Hmm.
light skin. And
Hmm.
it really made me feel like I didn't belong in the room.
Hmm.
And because I did love country a lot in my beginning years, I heard you have to do R&B. You'll never be able to do anything else.
Hmm.
It's the same thing they told Michael Jackson. You'll never do pop. He died the king of pop, by the way. But
Yeah,
that's
totally.
the same thing they told him. Like, you have to because you're brown. Like, not even
Interesting.
black, because you're
Hmm.
brown. You
Hmm.
have to do this sound. But I had so much in me. And so just battling through who God had called me to be versus
Yeah.
who they were saying I was.
Hmm.
And finally, I think it was my car accident where I literally couldn't write a song. I
Hmm.
couldn't go to a session. And it's like I couldn't hear any outside voices. I only heard God in that wheelchair every day
Yeah.
in that bed. nurses
Wow.
in and out. And God's like, let me tell you who I said you are.
Yeah.
That really started, and it just was years of undoing lies.
Hmm.
This industry, they are not, I don't even think some people are trying to take you out, but most people are
Hmm.
literally doing what they've seen. They're doing what they heard themselves. And I had to realize that if I don't learn the voice of God, I'm going to start
Yeah.
confusing his voice with theirs.
Totally.
I would tell anybody, and I do tell my young girls, you got to learn the voice of God. How does he
Hmm.
speak to you? Because
Yeah.
there's a lot of people saying a lot of things all
Totally.
the time.
Yeah.
So that's literally what still keeps me to this day, Chris. What deals
Yeah.
to do, what sessions to say yes to. I learned how he speaks to me.
Yeah. How does he speak to you in that context? Like for me, I would say it's actually even still not always clear to me, what I will say for me is that like I know it doesn't bring anxiety. Like if
Right.
I'm feeling anxiety, like that's actually one of the things I just know, like that's not God if I'm feeling like
Wow, that's
anxious in my spirit and something, you know. So what do you like? How does it? Is there anything you can? Because people love. I think we're all like, how does God speak to you? How does God speak to you?
right. I want to know. I'm actually going to take that anxiety one. That's a good one. Like, wait, this can't be you. I'm shaking.
Yeah, totally. And that it would take me forever to like to get that, and finally it was just
Mm,
like, man, that's not like how I'm going to speak to you. Like, you know, it's which doesn't mean that there's not going to be difficult things or hard things or things you don't want to maybe necessarily hear, but they come with like there's a peace that comes with it, you know.
that's so good. Oh, I'm so taking that, Chris. So good. That's so good. He speaks to me very lovingly.
Yeah.
So what'll happen is if something's happening and then I hear the voice, which happened just the other day,
Yeah.
and it was like, oh, you're just overcompensating because you feel bad about that. In my mind, I was like, my father would never talk to me like that.
Yeah.
He would
Yeah.
never say that. You're just
Yeah.
overcompensating, right? He might say, you don't have to ever overcompensate to
Yes.
feel
Yes.
worthy. But
Yeah.
he wouldn't say, oh, you're overcompensating just so that they don't look at you a certain type of, he wouldn't talk to
Right.
me like
Right.
that. And
Totally.
I literally
One's
just,
I was just saying one you can tell even just by the way you're expressing it, one is accusatory and one is like a guiding voice, you know?
that is the perfect way to explain it. And I'm like, oh no, and I've learned that the devil is a liar, the enemy
Hmm.
is a liar, which means he can't tell the truth. Which, so
Hmm.
if he says something, it's the opposite of whatever he's saying. So the
Yes.
minute I know that that's not my father talking, I then take the thought that I just had and I turn it, and it goes, oh, okay, so I did make a great decision.
Hmm.
It is okay to walk away from this. I'm not
Hmm.
overcompensating, but it literally is just this loving voice.
Hmm.
He's so kind to me. He guides me.
Yeah.
He loves on me, even in the chastening and in the discipline.
Yes.
That's how I know that's God.
That's good. That's so good. And I would think as well that, you know, when you're in an environment where there's so much, I mean, there's so much ground right now that the enemy has in
Yep.
entertainment,
Yep.
um, that you know it's almost like you have to be so in tune to the voice of the Lord because you're in, I would say, like the front lines battlefield to some degree. I mean, like we are all in our day-to-day life walking with the Lord to some degree, you know, but I think especially like when you're in something like that that's so you know, just so taken by the enemy at this point, you've got to really really dial into the voice of the Lord, I would imagine.
You have to. My entire day as a creative is based around checking in with him.
Yeah, that's so
I
good
don't
though.
allow myself to go long without
Hmm.
checking in with that.
Yeah,
And
that's
and
so
it's
good.
also strengthened my ability to hear.
That's really good. So then okay, so what has been like a highlight then for your career? Like what's something that you're like, man, that was just like that was amazing.
What should I think? I think having the highest selling K-pop girl group album in K-pop
Okay.
history.
That's pretty amazing.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it
And
is.
I think it's so cool because these songs were written, and some of them when I was like absolutely broke, delivering groceries, but I was still showing up to sessions, but then I deliver
Yeah.
groceries just to pay bills. And so then to see these songs turn around and like
Mhm.
bless so many, and in turn bless me and my family, I think it's just so cool to see God work.
Yeah,
And
that's
that
awesome.
moment for me was like, whoa,
Yeah,
we
that's
did.
so good. That's so good. So does your mom come to your shows, or does your family come when they can?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. They come to
Yeah.
everything. So, Chris, I just started the music theory for piano
Oh,
because I knew
awesome.
how to play, but I didn't know how to read. So I was like, I
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
read.
yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
like, I take this scholarship from a 12-year-old. And so I'm learning, like I'm in piano, like ding, ding, ding,
Yeah,
ding. I
yeah.
have a recital, and my mom's like, I will be there at the recital front row. It's gonna be all
That's
10-year-olds and
so
me.
amazing. I love it. I love it. That's so good. That is so good. I think that kind of support is so funny. My dad. So I played on the Olympic development team for soccer, and I played since I was like a young kid, and my dad never missed a single game. There was one time when actually it's so funny. The parents got into a fight, and he like knocked out like two dads and was not allowed to come to any more of the games. And so he bought this giant truck. He had to stay 100 yards away, and he had this like lawn chair on the roof of the truck, and he watched the whole thing. I mean, he still never missed one, and that was just kind of like the support of my dad.
I just want you to know that you like casually went over the Olympic development team state, like what? And then you casually went over that he knocked out two people. And I'm like, this story is so
Oh
intense.
man, it's really funny
Oh,
too because like it was in Colorado, and we
wow.
had we had one of the only African American players on our team. And
What?
so like the other team had called him something totally inappropriate, and then like the
Wow.
team started fighting, and then the parents jumped in, and my dad so it was like this chaotic situation of like suburban
I
Colorado,
love
you know.
your dad.
But anyways, it's a funny story. But just to say, like you know, I think people underestimate the power of just like loving parents who just show up for
Yeah,
everything, and are just always supportive of whatever it is you're doing. I mean, there's rocket fuel in that, in
it
that.
is.
Yeah.
It is. My mother is there for
Yeah.
everything she can be there for.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, okay, so tell us then. So you did a series called "Still Living" on the Restore 7 TV. Talk to us a little bit about like what that story is about, and just who that story is for.
Absolutely. So when we first set out to shoot Still Living, it was going to be a little bit of all of just what I've gone through and
Hmm.
felt like at the end of it, still living. But this specific situation ended up just aligning so well. And it was this story of what looks like the end could actually be the saving
Hmm.
grace of God for the best beginning you couldn't have even
Hmm.
imagined. And that was my life. Like when that car accident happened in 2017, went underneath a semi truck, broke both of my feet, broke a
Hmm.
leg completely in
Gosh.
half, arm snaps in half by the
Hmm.
steering wheel. Doctors are saying you won't walk again. I mean, it's just looking. And I
Hmm.
was a dancer and I danced and I performed. So you're
Yeah.
telling me I
Yeah.
might not walk on a stage or try
Gosh.
to moonwalk again? This is crazy. And
Hmm.
they're like, yeah, you're probably not going to walk, but if you walk, you're going to have a limp.
Hmm.
I mean, it was just bad news after bad news. And I mean, it might have been a little bit of the painkillers for sure, but my hope was high, Chris.
Yeah.
Believed, I just believed
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
such a radical way that
Yeah.
this wasn't the end. And
Yeah.
I went through PT and I kept showing up, and the pain of someone taking their fingers and trying to push your foot with metal in it back into original. I
Hmm.
mean, it was excruciating
Yeah.
week after week for almost 2 years.
Gosh.
And then to walk again,
Hmm.
to run again, to dance again, to
Hmm.
sing. I mean, I was just like, oh, you're a miracle worker.
Hmm.
And what looked like my end actually became this testimony has blessed so many people.
Hmm.
I would never want to go through it again, but I always say I'm
Yeah.
so grateful it happened to me, and
Yeah.
I'm just going to steward it well. I just
Hmm.
want people to know that whatever the end is, I just want to encourage you that God could possibly be setting you
Yeah.
up for the best story of your life.
Totally. That's so good. I love that. I love that. And I feel like your show is one of my favorite on the platforms. Like it's so good. Just the story is so powerful and the way you guys told it. I would encourage everyone to check that out. And then how does it kind of wrap up? Like what's the crescendo
Absolutely.
to that?
Absolutely. So we get to Florida to do
Hmm.
this show, which seemingly is my biggest show, considering who's headlining and the
Hmm.
type of people that would be there. And the Lord just decides to just strip me of a band. My pianist couldn't make it. And I just remember, like, this is not happening. And it just reminded me of 2017 when I was like,
Hmm.
this is not happening. And God was reminding me through this 3-4 year later experience, like, remember last time you thought it was the end,
Hmm.
remember the
Hmm.
last time you thought it was a crash.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
he walks me through this time, instead of my feet learning to walk again, my spirit
yeah.
learning to believe again. Will you go even when it
Hmm.
looks like it's not going to turn out well? And it,
Yeah.
he's still
That's
God.
that's so good, and it's so relatable. I feel like whether it's a car crash or
Yes.
something wounded in our spirit or whatever it is, I mean, I think that that is the pattern of God interacting with us, is just trying to, just say, are you going to step out? Will you trust me in this situation? And and unfortunately, that requires a bunch of uncomfortable things happening, because that's how you go through, that's how you walk through that specific development with the Lord, is when you get something pulled out from underneath you that you were really really hoping for, at least temporarily. And so I think that it's a very relatable story, so I really encourage everyone to check that out and to watch that. Chikk, what's like the future look like for you? What can you share with us? Like what's going on, or what?
I'm so excited. So I do have my online music school, which in
Hmm.
2024, we're launching it completely to
Okay.
the public. But I just want to train up other spiritual creatives. I
Mm.
want them to understand the mountain of arts and entertainment. I want them to understand the power of faith in the
Hmm.
marketplace and the power of spiritual grounding in the marketplace and creating from that space. I am working on a debut album
Okay.
in the works for about a year and a half, and it looks like April
That's
2024.
awesome.
So I'm so
Okay.
excited about that,
Okay.
and just continuing to grow in my journey with God, honestly.
That's awesome. Okay. So where can they find the school? Where can they find you online? Like what's the best places to?
Absolutely. It just at the Chikk experience, and you can
Okay.
find everything there. So Chikk is Chikkk. So
Hmm.
at the Chikk experience.
Okay. Awesome. That's so good. Well, Chick, thank you so much for joining us today, and doing this. And you're Johnny and Elizabeth just speak so highly of you, and we love you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, of course.